There was a stretch of country music, roughly the late 1970s through the early 1990s, that was rich, real, and full of songs that deserved to last forever. Most of them didn't. Here are the 12 forgotten country songs only Gen X remembers. Number 12, Me and Paul, by Willie Nelson.
I thought Nashville was the roughest, but I know why
Willie Nelson recorded Me and Paul in 1971, releasing it as the B-side to the single from his album Yesterday's Wine. The song peaked at number 62 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart, a modest showing for something that, in hindsight, stands as one of the most personal pieces Nelson ever put to tape.
city's obligation, me and Paul.
The song is built around the real friendship between Willie Nelson and his longtime drummer, Paul English. The two met in the late 1950s, and English became one of the most dependable constants in Nelson's career, playing drums in the band for decades. Nelson wrote the song as a tribute to that bond, a straightforward account of life on the road, of shows in places where things went sideways, of police encounters, canceled gigs, and the kind of loyalty that doesn't ask for anything in return. What makes the song unusual is how specific it is. Nelson wasn't reaching for something universal. He was writing about his life and his friend, and somehow that intimacy made it resonate with anyone who had ever had a person in their corner through the rough patches.
I'm surprised to find my mind still fairly sound.
Nelson had been recording since the late 1950s and had already built a reputation as one of Nashville's sharpest songwriters before his recording career as a performer took hold. By 1971, when Yesterday's Wine came out, he was in a transitional period, moving away from the polished Nashville sound and toward the rawer, more personal music he would become known for. Me and Paul fit squarely into that shift. It wasn't dressed up for radio. It was just Nelson telling a true story about a real person, set to a melody that made it easy to carry with you. English played drums with Nelson until his health declined. He passed away in February 2020, just weeks before Nelson's next album was released. Paul English was 87 years old. Me and Paul had outlasted every era of radio trend it was born into, and if you heard it once, it had a way of staying.
I thought Nashville was the roughest, but I know why I'm...
Number 11, Fishin' in the Dark, by Nitty Gritty Dirt Band.
You and me going fishing in the dark.
The Nitty Gritty Dirt Band released Fishin' in the Dark in 1987 as part of their album Hold On, and it went to number 1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart. If you were alive and listening to country radio that summer, you heard it. And then, somewhere along the way, it slipped out of the rotation that kept other songs from its era alive. The song was written by Wendy Waldman and Jim Photoglow, and it's one of the more purely joyful pieces of country music from that decade. An easy rolling summer song about a couple slipping away from the noise of daily life to go fishing in the dark, catching fireflies, sitting by the river. Nothing heavy, nothing complicated. Just two people choosing a quiet moment together over everything else demanding their attention.
You and me going fishing in the dark, lying on a...
What the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band did with it was find the exact right tempo and tone. They'd already been an institution in country and country folk circles for years by then, going back to the early 1970s, and their landmark, Will the Circle Be Unbroken album. Fishin' in the Dark wasn't trying to be an artistic statement. It was just a good song done well, and it hit. By 2014, the Recording Industry Association of America had certified it platinum based on digital download sales alone. That's not a forgotten song in terms of numbers, but ask someone under 40 if they know it, and most will draw a blank. It belongs to a specific generation that still hears it with a flash of warm recognition.
You and me going fishing in the dark.
Number 10, Crazy Over You, by Foster and Lloyd.
Everybody in town knows I'm crazy over you.
Radney Foster and Bill Lloyd were both working as staff songwriters at MTM Publishing in Nashville when they began writing together in the mid-1980s. When their co-written song, Since I Found You, became a hit for the Sweethearts of the Rodeo, they used that momentum to secure a recording deal of their own with RCA Records. Their debut single, Crazy Over You, was released in May 1987, and it shot to number 4 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart. On the radio and records country chart, it reached number 1. The song carried a rockabilly energy, Foster's confident lead vocal, Lloyd's instinct for a memorable pop country hook, and the kind of close harmony that leaned into the Everly Brothers tradition without copying it outright. Foster had grown up in Del Rio, Texas, bringing a traditional country DNA to the partnership, while Lloyd, from Bowling Green, Kentucky, had a love of clean, chiming guitar and melody-first songwriting. The blend was distinct enough that critics paid attention, and the duo produced 3 albums for RCA before disbanding in 1990. What Crazy Over You does that most debut singles don't is sound fully formed. There's no hedging in it. It knows exactly what it is, and it delivers. The duo reunited briefly in 2010, but neither their earlier catalog nor that reunion drew much attention from a new audience. If you were tuned into country radio in 1987, though, you caught this one, and it was hard to forget.
Everybody in town knows I'm crazy over you.
Number 9, 80s Ladies by K.T. Oslin. K.T. Oslin was 43 years old when she secured a recording deal with RCA Records Nashville in 1986, after producer Harold Shedd caught her performance at a Nashville showcase. That alone set her apart in a Nashville landscape that was already beginning to skew toward younger female acts. Her debut album, also titled 80s Ladies, came out in June 1987. The title track was released as the second single that April. It reached number 7 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart, not a chart topper by conventional measure, but it became one of the most played songs of 1987 and won her the Grammy Award for Best Female Country Vocal Performance. The Country Music Association gave her the Song of the Year award, making her the first female songwriter to receive that honor. The song is written from the perspective of a trio of women looking back across the span of their adult lives. The social upheaval, the choices made, the fires burned at both ends. It is a genuine artifact of its moment, a song that treated women over 40 as full human beings, worthy of a spotlight at the top of the country charts, at a time when that was genuinely unusual. Oslin continued recording through the early 1990s, and her 1988 follow-up album, This Woman, produced 2 more #1 country hits. She passed away in December 2020 at the age of 78 after battling Parkinson's disease. 80s Ladies was her signature, and for anyone who understood what it was actually saying, it still lands the same way. Number 8, Chiseled in Stone by Vern Gosdin.
You don't know about long.
Vern Gosdin was already in his late 40s when he released Chiseled in Stone in 1988, and the album title track became one of the defining honky-tonk ballads of that era. The song was released as a single in August of that year, climbing to number 4 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart. Gosdin was known in country music circles as The Voice, a nod to the raw, emotional depth he brought to traditional country material. He had been recording since the 1960s, first as part of the Gosdin Brothers alongside his brother Rex, then later as a solo act, who kept drifting in and out of the mainstream spotlight. By the late 1980s, his run of hits on Columbia Records finally gave him the sustained commercial recognition he'd been working toward for 2 decades.
Till it's chiseled in stone.
Chiseled in Stone is one of those songs that earns every note it plays. It's a conversation between 2 people, one broken by heartbreak, the other who has been there before, and knows there are no shortcuts through real pain. The exchange is plain-spoken and honest, without any of the melodrama that lesser songs reach for when trying to convey the same thing. The album that bore its name was later inducted into the list of essential country recordings by the Country Music Hall of Fame. Gosdin passed away in 2009. Outside of traditional country music circles, his name rarely comes up today. But for anyone who heard Chiseled in Stone in 1988, it left a mark.
You don't know about long.
Number 7, Somewhere Tonight by Highway 101.
Somewhere tonight,
Before Highway 101 placed Who's Lonely Now at the top of the country charts in 1990, they had already scored their first #1 hit 3 years earlier. Somewhere Tonight reached the top spot in August 1987, and it was the song that announced the band to mainstream country audiences. Highway 101 was built around the voice of Paulette Carlson, whose clear, direct delivery gave the group a distinctive front-of-stage presence that set them apart from the country acts of that moment. The band was formed in Los Angeles and signed to Warner Brothers Records Nashville, and their arrival on the charts came right as traditional-leaning country was beginning to push back against the pop-heavy direction the genre had drifted toward in the mid-1980s. Somewhere Tonight was a heartache song, a woman knowing her partner is out there spending time with someone else and having to sit with that knowledge through the night. Carlson didn't oversell it. She sang it straight, and the restraint made it hit harder. The song was written by Rodney Foster and Bill Lloyd, the same duo who would release Crazy Over You as performers that same year. Highway 101 went on to have several more charting singles, and Carlson eventually left the group in 1991 to pursue a solo career. The band continued with a replacement vocalist before eventually disbanding. But Somewhere Tonight was the moment they stepped into the conversation, and it held up. Number 6, Set 'Em Up Joe by Vern Gosdin.
Set 'em up, Joe, and play walking the floor.
The second Vern Gosdin song on this list arrived in April 1988, a few months before Chiseled in Stone was released as a single. Set 'Em Up Joe reached #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart and was written by Hank Cochran, Buddy Cannon, Dean Dillon, and Gosdin himself. Honky-tonk laments about heartbreak and barroom drinking go back to the very foundations of country music, and by 1988, the form had been done thousands of times. What made Set 'Em Up Joe stand out was its economy. It didn't reach for anything fancy. It was a man at a bar, working through a loss he hadn't asked for, and it had the texture and weight of something lived in rather than written to formula.
Set 'em up, Joe, and play walking the floor.
Gosdin's voice had a natural ache that suited the material perfectly. There was nothing theatrical about how he sang it. Co-writers like Dean Dillon had already helped shape some of the era's most important country recordings. Dillon had co-written many of George Strait's biggest hits, and the craftsmanship in this song shows in how much ground it covers in very little time. By the end of 1988, Gosdin had produced 2 separate top 5 country singles from the same album cycle, which was a significant run for an artist whose commercial profile had been uneven for much of his career. Few people outside dedicated country audiences would know either song today, which is a particular kind of oversight.
Set 'em up, Joe, and play walking the floor.
Number 5, Joe Knows How to Live by Eddie Raven.
He says women were made to love.
Eddie Raven released Joe Knows How to Live in May 1988 as a single from his compilation album The Best of Eddie Raven, and it went to #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart. The song was written by Troy Seals, Max D. Barnes, and Graham Lyle, and it had already been recorded by the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band a year earlier, though not as a single. The song is told from the point of view of a factory worker watching his co-worker Joe live freely and unapologetically, in a way the narrator never quite manages. Joe takes off to Mexico with a waitress named Betty. He comes back with photos and a hat and a grin. The narrator, left behind at the assembly line, can't quite condemn him for it, even as he suspects Joe is stretching his sick days and maybe his marriage.
Life is something, but
Raven delivers the whole thing with a knowing, wry tone that sits somewhere between admiration and resignation. The humor is embedded in the specific details, the names, the places, the factory setting, and those details are what make the story feel true, rather than constructed. Eddie Raven had a solid run on the country charts in the 1980s, but he never built the kind of name recognition that followed artists like George Strait or Randy Travis into subsequent decades. His catalog from that period holds up remarkably well, and Joe Knows How to Live is one of the strongest examples of what he was capable of.
he says women were made to love.
Number 4, 18 Wheels and a Dozen Roses by Kathy Mattea.
18 wheels and a dozen.
Kathy Mattea released 18 Wheels and a Dozen Roses in 1988 as the lead single from her album Untasted Honey. Written by Gene Nelson and Paul Nelson, the song went to #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart and won the Country Music Association's Single of the Year award that year. The song tells the story of a long-haul truck driver finishing his last run before retirement. Not a sad ending, but a happy one. He's going home for good, to the woman he's built his life alongside. The romance in the song is quiet and earned. It's about two people who chose each other and kept choosing each other through years of distance and sacrifice.
10 more miles on his phone.
Mattea came from West Virginia and had been building a name for herself in Nashville since the early 1980s. Her voice had a warmth and a folk-leaning clarity that suited the song's mood exactly. It didn't need any theatrical flourishes because the story was doing the work. In a remarkable piece of timing, Mattea was in the middle of performing 18 Wheels and a Dozen Roses on stage in 2023 when she received an invitation to become a member of the Grand Ole Opry. The song that had defined her commercial peak was still the one playing when that honor arrived. Mattea went on to win 2 consecutive Grammy Awards for Best Female Country Vocal Performance in 1990 and 1991, cementing a run that made her one of the most respected voices in Nashville. It's a run that tends to get overshadowed by the decade that followed, when the commercial scale of country music shifted dramatically. But 18 Wheels and a Dozen Roses belongs to a specific moment in late 1980s country, before the early 1990s explosion, when quiet, well-crafted songs about working-class life still had room at the top of the charts.
18 wheels and a dozen.
Number 3. The Church on Cumberland Road by Shenandoah. Shenandoah released The Church on Cumberland Road in January 1989 as the second single from their album The Road Not Taken. It reached #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart in April 1989, becoming the group's first chart topper in both the United States and Canada. The song was written by Bob DiPiero, John Scott Sherrill, and Dennis Robbins, who had actually recorded it himself first as a B-side 2 years earlier, before Shenandoah's version came along and made it a hit. The story follows a young man racing against time to get to a church on Cumberland Road where his girl is waiting. He partied too hard the night before, his old Ford is barely cooperating, his friends in the back seat are in various states of disrepair, and the urgency keeps mounting with every verse. Lead singer Marty Raybon was exactly the right voice for it. He could play the comic desperation without tipping it into farce, keeping just enough sincerity in the delivery to make the listener root for him to get there. Shenandoah went on to have several more #1 hits from that same album, which was a significant commercial run. In 2025, they re-recorded the song with Nickelback and released an animated video companion, bringing it back to a new audience after more than 3 decades. For Gen X listeners who caught it the first time around, that original 1989 recording carries an immediacy that no remake fully recaptures. Number 2. If the Devil Danced in Empty Pockets by Joe Diffie.
With a 9-foot grand, a 10-piece band, and a 12-girl.
Joe Diffie released If the Devil Danced in Empty Pockets in April 1991 as the third single from his debut album A Thousand Winding Roads. It went to #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart in June 1991, giving him his second consecutive chart-topping single from his debut record. The song was written by Ken Spooner and Kim Williams, and it's a comedy song done with enough care that it doesn't wear out its welcome. The premise is simple. A working man with empty pockets gets talked into buying a car he can't afford. The devil finds nothing in those pockets to tempt him with, so he ends up living inside a bad financial decision instead.
When I got there, the lot was bare, but the salesman said,
Diffie was a naturally expressive singer with a big, warm baritone, and he had an easy way with humor that served this material perfectly. His debut album also produced the #1 ballad, Home, which showed he could handle both ends of the emotional range. But If the Devil Danced is the one that captures something specific about his personality as a performer. The everyman who sees the joke in his own misfortune and tells you about it with a grin. Joe Diffie passed away in March 2020 at the age of 61 from complications related to COVID-19, one of the first major figures in country music to be lost in the early weeks of the pandemic. His death brought renewed attention to his catalog, and for a brief window, a new generation encountered these songs for the first time.
With a 9-foot grand, a 10-piece band, and a 12-girl.
Number 1. Who's Lonely Now? By Highway 101.
Who's lonely now? Who's high?
Highway 101's Who's Lonely Now was released in late 1989 and reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart in January 1990, making it the first number 1 country song of the new decade. By this point, Paulette Carlson was still fronting the band, and the song put her vocal abilities front and center. Who's Lonely Now was co-written by Kix Brooks, who would go on to form Brooks and Dunn later that same year, along with Don Cook, and it had the kind of direct, uncomplicated emotional pull that great country singles are built on.
I've had my share of those blues.
The band had already proven themselves with Somewhere Tonight and a string of follow-up charting singles. But Who's Lonely Now arrived at a transitional moment for country music, right on the edge between the polished late 1980s sound and the new traditionalist wave that was about to reshape the genre through the early 1990s. Acts like Garth Brooks, Clint Black, and Alan Jackson were just beginning to emerge, and the charts were about to look very different. Highway 101 is rarely mentioned in surveys of country music from that era, which is something of an injustice. Carlson had a distinctive voice, the band played with conviction, and for a stretch of 3 years they produced some of the most solid, dependable country singles on the radio. Who's Lonely Now was the peak of that run. If you lived through it, it's the kind of song that comes back to you completely. The melody, the feeling, all of it. The moment you hear those first few notes again.
Who's lonely now? Who's high?
These 12 songs represent a stretch of country music that deserves more than nostalgia. They deserve to be heard again on their own terms. If any of these brought something back for you, drop it in the comments. And if you want more videos like this one, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.